Hello everyone, my name is Carrie Carlson and I'm going to talk to y'all today about concussion and traumatic brain injury. I'm a brain injury specialist with Brain Links. And this short series is on monitoring and remembering injury. So I'm going to start off with monitoring, and this slide is about the early intervention system. So nationally, there's an early intervention system for children that are not yet school-aged. So in Tennessee, it's TEIS, Tennessee Early Intervention System. So we know nationally that if a child is injured early on in life, they will likely pass that screening that they get to go into the early intervention system. But if they're tested a year later, they are very likely to fail that testing, right? Because kids, as they grow and as their brain develops, they're now using a completely different part of their brain. A 2-year-old is going to use a whole lot less of their brain than a 5-year-old will. And that's just how, 2-year-old, you mom and dad are still, teaching you and giving you those easy, simple 1 or 2 word requests, or, you can only retain 1 or 2 words at a time. And 5-year-olds, when you go into kindergarten, you're starting to put complex things together. So we always have to remember that injury and keep monitoring for that, because even if you're injured at 5 years old, when you're 8, you're still using a completely different part of your brain, right? Right here, we love this slide. This is the 5 distinct periods of maturation. So right here, this really high peak right here, let me back up. So down at the bottom, so this is from 0 to about 23 or 24. That is the age range down there. And our brain is not completely developed until later into our 20s. They say about 23, 24 years old. And that is if we've never had an injury, we've never abused drugs or alcohol, we've never been in any kind of accident, we've never been exposed to toxins. So let's say our brains are usually developed at about 26 or 27, right? But right here, this first peak, that is about 0 to about 6 years old. So right there, that is one of the most critical times for our brains to develop. But that's also one of the most prevalent times for falls and brain injuries. If you think about everything a 0 to 5-year-old is doing, or 6-year-old, I have a 5-year-old. We're learning how to skate. She's on the trampoline. We're learning how to ride our bike. Younger than that, you're learning how to walk. You're rolling over. You're learning how to run. But also, during that time, you're learning how to trust people. You're learning who you can trust in your world. You're learning you're beginning to learn consequences for your actions, right? And then let's take another look at this. So from about 14 to about 18, that's another huge peak for brain development. You are playing sports, you're learning how to drive a car, you're invincible. I know at this age I was invincible. However, this is also the time that you're learning how to be a positive, contributing member of society. You're learning who you are in the world. And we know that if you don't learn who you are, that you're less likely to have successful relationships, have a successful career. It just really kind of sets you up for failure later on in life. So we have to remember the biggest takeaway from this slide is if you're injured during one of these critical times of learning, during any time of learning, but especially trusting, how do you trust people? How do you become a positive member of society? Those learning areas could be paused, or they might not happen at all. So you might be working with somebody who is just significantly missing something like that. And it could be, especially if you know that they've had a brain injury. So this is as it says. If, as a part of the medical care, we provide systematic transition services, they are more likely to receive the supports the student needs at school. So if you're talking about transitioning from the hospital back to school, especially if you've got a kid who now needs a 504 IEP, and you get a plan of care to transition from that physician, that school does not have to use that, but they're more likely to use what is on there to help transition that kid at first. But as transitionary services for anything, you know, it's better to have that doctor's backup for a lot of things, especially within the school system. And this is a perfect example of no transitionary services whatsoever. So this is Zach. He was in an ATV accident. He was 4, loss of consciousness. His GCS, Glasgow Coma score, was an 8. So if you know anything about a Glasgow Coma scale, 15 is really good, and a 4 is really bad. So he was an 8. He was agitated, nonverbal, and he moved all of his extremities. He had multiple skull fractures. His brain was shifted due to those skull fractures. This was not a concussion. This is a brain injury. And it says down here he recovered beautifully. And that means he looked beautiful. He's got a tiny scar. If you would see the pictures of him in the hospital compared to now, you'd never know that was the same kid. But his mom got a hold of us because he's failing kindergarten. He's hitting other children, so he's being impulsive. He's wandering around the classroom, very disruptive, very impulsive. He's not identified at school as having a brain injury. Even though mom was telling them he had a brain injury, his teacher was like, oh, he's just being a boy. So if you have, and we love our teachers, but if you have a class of 18 and you've got 11 boys and all the boys in the classroom are acting like this, like that's a pretty wild classroom, right? No, this little boy, he had a TBI and he needed services and supports, and he needed to be identified so that the teacher and the school could move forward with helping him. And I guarantee you that teacher was so much happier once we figured out what's going on. You know, I wasn't involved in this one, but you know, it was just that getting that identification and making sure that he got the services and support. Because even a kid like this, if you put him on the ADHD medicine, it's not going to get to the root of the problem with this, right? And then we already know that families that have poor coping and they're dysfunctional, they already have a greater level of dysfunction within the family. And then if you throw a traumatic brain injury on top of that, that's going to make that even greater. So they need those services. They need those supports. Always bring us in. BrainLinks is always here to help. We would love to help, or we have a service coordination program, which we have a video on that here in the state of Tennessee. They can get involved. They can help. But families need those services and supports, especially when something like a brain injury is just thrown on their lap and they already have this level of dysfunction and poor coping. And then we have our signs and symptoms. So, I'm sorry, this is our when concussion symptoms are not going away. So this is from the first day of injury all the way through a year and beyond. So if you have a child, and we have a signs and symptoms also that goes along with these, but if you have a child who's had a brain injury and they're still having signs and symptoms, this can walk that parent or caregiver through a whole system, and it even talks about when you need to get the school involved, like a 504 IEP, or, you know, when at that point in time when you need to go seek more medical attention to possibly get a referral. So these are great. The link is in the description on where you can go to download these. And then, like I said, we're always happy to come in. We do trainings for schools, healthcare providers. It's really limitless to who we will come and talk to and work with to try and help those children or families with brain injury. And please always follow us on BrainLink, on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube channel. You're here. Or go to our website, and you can always find all these great resources. We've got trainings on there, and you can And have a great day. Please follow our videos. Bye.